Arsenal could definitely do with getting a trophy locked in. Some might say it is City's best hope for silverware, but who needs it more?
Mikel Arteta. I think it would be huge for them with what they're going for towards the back end of the season to win that first trophy. Certainly to quieten down a few doubters about their credentials in getting over the line.
If City were to lose this game at Anfield and United beat Tottenham, the gap between the two Manchester clubs is down to 3 points. And all of a sudden, you're talking about City maybe not being cemented in second place.
You would expect Arsenal at home to Sunderland to get 3 points before Sunday. So it'll feel like it'll be huge for Manchester City.
But it was a little bit concerning last night, wasn't it, that there were so many empty seats at the Etihad?
A lot of them probably felt the tie was won after the first leg, which it was. The game was effectively over. Cost of living, we just had Christmas. They played a lot of midweek games in the Champions League because of the extra match in the league format. So I won't hammer them too much.
Yes, Dashboard Dean Ashton is here, out of his form Mondeo and into what is it? Is this a new high performance podcast studio? Because it looks less sort of like home for a Premier League star and more like witness protection.
That's outlandish, that is, for my lounge. Disgraceful.
That's your lounge. Oh, sorry. The Sortmeister is back from a day trip to Newcastle this week with Gabby Agbonlahor, who sent me a stream of pictures of him devouring, the Crookie Monster devouring the first-class hospitality. Stayed out till 2:30 because there was a free bar, apparently. I'm surprised you could see the screen, to be honest with you. Is the room spinning, or is that your opinions just changing again?
Do you know what? It took me about 3 days to get back from Newcastle. That is a long way north for me.
It really is. I hit a new low this week, Dino. You weren't going to believe this. I had deadline day off, and I was in London, and because I was in between games. So it was Tottenham Sunday, Chelsea Arsenal on Tuesday, and deadline day. I was in London, had nothing to do. I spent hours just waiting around like a little lost puppy, sitting on a suitcase in the talkSPORT reception, waiting for Crook to finish, just so we could go for a pint. I think I need to get a life.
I think you do, yes. I think that's the pull that he clearly has on you, Sam.
He seriously does. Okay, first final of the season is set. It's a juicy game. It's Manchester City against Arsenal. I was at both these second legs this week. Last time the pair met in a final was 2018, and Mikel Arteta at the time was City's assistant manager. Arsenal could definitely do with getting a trophy locked in. Some might say it is City's best hope for silverware. But speaking to Tijani Reinders last night, he said that they're going to hunt Arsenal down. We'll talk about that shortly, Dean, but who needs it more?
I think Mikel Arteta. I think it would be huge for them with what they're going for towards the back end of the season to win that first trophy and sort of not get that off his back, because I think they are going to win something this season, but certainly to quieten down a few doubters about their credentials in getting over the line. And until that happens, I guess he will have to take that from the media, from opposition supporters.
It will be the 22nd time that Manchester City have been to Wembley under Pep Guardiola. It's the 32nd occasion since 2011 when Yaya Touré's goal in the FA Cup Semi Final kind of opened the trophy floodgates. I'm sure that they will fill their allocation, but it was a little bit concerning last night, wasn't it, that there were so many empty seats at the Etihad, Crook?
Listen, this is always quite a political debate to get into when it comes to Manchester City and their supporters. I think a lot of them probably felt the tie was won after the first leg, which it was. The game was effectively over after 7 minutes in midweek. There's a financial crisis that I think is affecting everybody. Cost of living. We just had Christmas. They played a lot of midweek games in the Champions League because of the extra match in the league format. So I won't hammer them too much, and I'm sure they will sell their allocation. But it was quite a soulless environment, wasn't it, for you to be commentating in on Wednesday night?
I just wonder whether or not the club could have done a little bit more. Speaking to some of the Manchester City supporters that were there, the suggestion is that the prices had not been reduced to sort of reflect the situation in the game. So therefore, it wasn't like they'd encouraged everybody to come along and get involved. So by making tickets cheaper to ensure that they had a full sellout crowd. I think sometimes when you're in that situation, you've almost got to cut your losses. It's not like Manchester City don't make enough money. If you look at their commercial revenue, it's 400 million quid a year they get from commercial revenue. Their match day revenue isn't as high as someone like Manchester United or Arsenal or whatever. But the way to build that is by getting more people in early in their life, make tickets a quid or whatever, get more people from the local area in, so that over time you're building up the level of fan base. Pep, in his latest pronouncement, thinks that the EFL should change the rules for him. Mark Gahey should be allowed to play in the final. He's our player. We bought him, he said. He's not on loan. Mark Guiu scored for Sunderland in round 3, played for Chelsea later in the tournament, including in the semi-final. Semenyo has played for both Palace and Manchester City in this tournament. The EFL, Dean Ashton, have opened the door to this sort of talk, haven't they, with that rule change earlier in the campaign?
Yes, yes, they have. And I think that's probably why Pep is so frustrated and probably feels like he can't understand why Semenyo has been able to play, but Gay can't. And it's probably because right now it feels so important that he is available because of their lack of centre-back availability. I know Ruben Diaz was back on the bench last night, but that's probably another reason why it's irked him slightly. And it just feels as if at the moment he is kind of batting a lot of the questions back to the media, and he's not just letting things go at the moment.
Crookie, are we comfortable with Dean being in this room? Is he as relaxed as he usually is when he's got the dashboard in front of him and the furry dice? I'm not sure. He doesn't feel like he's in a comfortable environment there. I'm slightly worried. Looks a little bit soulless. Should we get him a potted plant for his birthday or something? I'm slightly worried about it.
He needs a picture of you and I on the wall behind him.
I think he does. Something like that. Talking of disappointing environments, Eddie Howe got a lot of stick on social media last night. I mean, that is nonsense. I mean, the fact that the travelling fans sang his name loudly when the team are 3-0 down at the Etihad Stadium, I think sends more of a powerful message of support and unity in what is clearly a difficult time from the match-going fans. This is a guy who isn't under pressure, and nor should he be, Crook.
No, we had the chief executive, David Hopkinson, on our programme up at Newcastle on Wednesday, and he was very wholesome in his praise of Eddie Howe. Says they have a brilliant partnership. I think he appreciates it's been a difficult couple of windows, actually, with a lot of the signings not particularly working out so far. But it's funny, isn't it? Because Liam Rosenior got hammered for being too cautious when Chelsea went to Arsenal on Tuesday night. Eddie Howe had the opposite game plan. He tried to press high, force mistakes, get that early goal, and very quickly the tie slipped away from him. So you've got two English managers who've both been pilloried for very different approaches, ultimately in games that they were struggling to get through anyway, I think.
Yeah, well, listen, they were both up against it and they both chose different approaches. I actually believe that Chelsea got closer to achieving their goals than Newcastle did, but I don't think either of them were ever going to overturn that first leg deficit. It never looked really on the cards. And Newcastle in a bind, right? They've got no Miley, no Livramento, no Bruno, no Joel Linton, no Cher. They're all injury absentees. And some of the players that actually are playing in games are carrying injuries or just coming back from injury. They're playing in their third League Cup semi-final in 4 years. The trophy that they won last season, the first one for 56 years. They can still qualify for the last 16 of the Champions League. They are some way off in the Premier League in terms of getting into Europe next season, but you never know. This is a team that were fighting relegation when he joined. Right, let's get on to the weekend's Premier League action. And Crook and I are going to a very special game, a blockbuster clash at Anfield. Liverpool against Manchester City, Sunday, 4:30. Has this fixture been the most entertaining of the last decade, going through the Pep Klopp years, Dino?
I think in terms of intensity, yes. In terms of quality, it can be a little up and down, just because they have matched each other up so well over the years. I'm always a little bit sceptical just in terms of will it really take off this type of fixture, but it does feel as if this one really could do. I think that confidence boosting win for Liverpool against Newcastle, you can tell has done something not only for Arne Slot, but I think for that forward line just starting to look pretty electric with Wirtz and Ekitike's combination, and maybe Gahey you'd think would be partnered with Ruben Diaz. That'll be interesting to see if Ruben Diaz starts that game and their partnership at the heart of the Manchester City defence.
I got an email earlier in the week from Bill who says, Sam, I saw that Alex Crook predicted Liverpool-Newcastle would be a cagey, low-scoring game last week. Honestly, if that guy told me the sun was coming up tomorrow, I'd start stockpiling candles. But without running the risk of you getting it wrong again, could you tell us what you think might happen in this game? Do you think this could be low-scoring?
Listen, my predictions since the turn of the year have not been great. So, I would probably ignore whatever I say. But I think it's a massive game for both teams. I would say that. Liverpool, in terms of trying to build on that momentum from an excellent comeback win at home to Newcastle, going forward, one of their better performances of the season. And Manchester City, not only to keep on the coattails of Arsenal, but as Gabriel Bonlahor was telling me throughout our trip to Newcastle, if City were to lose this game at Anfield and United beat Tottenham, the gap between the two Manchester clubs is down to 3 points. And all of a sudden, you're talking about City maybe not being cemented in second place in the Premier League.
It wasn't too long ago, Dean. I think it was probably about sort of 70 minutes into the game against Fulham on Sunday, where he was pretending to smoke a cigar and telling everybody that Manchester United were going to finish third. When Fulham scored 2 late goals, he had a massive, massive panic up. That cigar was stubbed out very quickly and then relit when Benjamin Šeško smashed it into the top corner. So he even flip-flopped during the course of about 20 minutes during that match on Sunday. It was quite fun to be around. But these two sides actually are quite fun to be around as well, aren't they? Because they're slightly different to the norm. This is a league that has become very physical. It's been sort of long throws, free kicks, set pieces. And they are not like this, are they? I mean, Arne Slot and Pep Guardiola are more sort of purist managers, and they demand that from their teams. Does that mean that we're going to get a better spectacle?
I think it'll be more tactical. I think it's going to be interesting to see how each manager kind of sets up their side, who is going to be the one that maybe presses from the front, you would expect. Even at Anfield, Liverpool haven't really been that team under Arne Slot. Even against the lesser sides, they have sat back in certain parts of the game. So I think tactically it's going to be interesting. I think in terms of attacking play, because of the players that are on show, that's what I'm looking forward to is to seeing those when games are that tight and that your level has to be so high because of how good the opposition is. I think that's when the best players will show you things, certainly show me, in tight, tense environments, who's really the best. If Cherky plays, if Foden plays, if Semenyo, Vert, who is it that really is going to stand out in that sort of game? Haaland has struggled at times against Liverpool. Who is going to really stand out in that game to get their team the 3 points? I think it's bigger for Manchester City because you'd expect Arsenal at home to Sunderland to get 3 points before Sunday, so it'll feel like it'll be huge for Manchester City.
Haaland's struggling a little bit in front of goal. 2 goals in his last 12 now. One of those was a penalty. He missed 2 very good chances, actually, in the game against Newcastle after coming off the bench. 2 good saves from Aaron Ramsdale. There were some interesting comments from Arne Slot in midweek, Crooks, talking to the club's own in-house podcast, in which he said, as a manager, you can win the league, you can win the Champions League, you can win an FA Cup or a League Cup, but the biggest thing you can win is that you can play the nicest football to watch. How will that go down with Liverpool fans, bearing in mind that some of his comments that he's made have not been the most popular?
Yeah, I think again it will divide opinion. Actually, well, name dropping, we had Stephen Bunting, the darts player, on our show on Wednesday, big Liverpool fan, and he was advocating for Arne Slot to go and Xabi Alonso to come in. I had to remind him that they are the defending Premier League champions, so it's not been a brilliant season, but there are circumstances, I think, that have more than contributed to that. But there are a lot of Liverpool fans who are trying to pick holes with what Arne Slot says, and actually the football hasn't been great to watch this season. I think at times the biggest criticism from Liverpool fans is that maybe it's been a bit laboured, it's been a bit one-paced. Even early on against Newcastle, that was the case. There has been a change. There was a change in that game. I think Wirtz is getting better, as you've already mentioned. So, yeah, I don't think it's a disaster for Liverpool. And I'm torn because on one hand, I think the spectre of Xabi Alonso hanging over him is a dark cloud. But on the other, I'm just not sure this ownership group, the sporting director Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards above him, are going to will want to be seen as those guys who sack a title-winning manager less than a year later.
Interesting that Xabi Alonso popped up on the alleged shortlist of managers to replace Pep Guardiola as well this week, because that feels like it's gathering momentum. His departure, anyway, so that's the talk of the town at the moment. You mentioned Florian Wirtz, and I think one of the key things that's happened with you can't accuse them of being boring over the last two games. They scored 10 goals, and they've been involved in some brilliant thriller-minute matches, haven't they? That Bournemouth match, and then the Carabao match, and then the game against Newcastle United. So it's certainly not dull, boring, or one-paced anymore, Dean Ashton. But Florian Wirtz and Ekitike have started to click. I don't know whether or not that's because they've been together for a longer period of time now and it's all starting to work, or they're starting to find that they've adapted to the physicality of the Premier League. But the combination between the two is quite something to behold.
Yeah, it is. It's leading in the Premier League in terms of goals coming from a combination, a pair of attacking players. They're leading the way now, and you could actually see that even right at the start of the season. And sometimes it just clicks with a player. It doesn't even mean that you have to work on it. It's just there. It's really hard to explain how sometimes you just have this innate ability to find each other, know where each other's going to move, how the other person needs the ball when you give it to him. You could see it straight away that there was a connection there. It's taken a little bit of time. Mainly Ekitike and Wirtz play together in the same team, with Wirtz being in the position that I think he's best, which is through the middle, just behind the striker. And all of a sudden, I suppose it exploded a bit against Newcastle, just in terms of how good that combination could be. I felt like I'd already seen it, just not maybe as consistent and as explosive as it felt, against Newcastle. And all of a sudden, I felt on social media, I saw so many people all of a sudden going, actually, hang on, how good are these two players? Well, I did feel it was quite obvious still,
yes,
without the consistency.
Going back to the early part of the season, I mean, one, Ekitike started like a train that's done very well since he's been there. But also, I actually thought, and I know he was getting a lot of criticism on social media, and maybe some people in the podcast were a little bit funny about him as well. But Florian Wirtz, I think, terrific player. He showed it from the start. I don't think some of his teammates were on the same wavelength as him right at the beginning of the season, which cost him a couple of assists and chances converted. But he's obviously got into a groove now. They've started to understand him a little bit more. And what a delightful player he is to watch, by the way. Manchester City led at halftime against Chelsea. They led against Brighton and Tottenham at the break, only to throw away points in those matches. They were blown away by Manchester United in the second half of the Manchester derby. Even in the wins against Wolverhampton Wanderers and Galatasaray, the second halves have been unconvincing. And actually, last night in the Newcastle game, the second half, they completely tailed off. What is that down to? Concentration, fitness, fatigue? What's going on here, Crook? Because if they switch off in the second half against Liverpool, they're in trouble.
I think it was concentration at Tottenham. It was almost too easy that first half, but you'll have the stats. How many second half goals have City scored since the turn of the year?
Well, I don't have them, actually. But I can find them out for you.
I think I'm right in saying, unless I misread this stat, I think it's now 7 games in a row where they've not scored after half time, which is a big issue for Pep Guardiola. You wonder what's going on during that 15-minute break. It can't be down to fitness, can it? I mean, I know they've got players like Rodri potentially, who is probably still finding his feet, and maybe one or two of those defenders. Nathan Ake is not quite at the top of his fitness either, but there's got to be more to it than that. And I do think concentration is the main part.
Well, they scored a second half goal against Bodo Glimt 4 games ago, so it wasn't
maybe it's 1 in 7 now then, but
Yeah.
certainly the statistics are quite damning. But even earlier in the season, that there were games where they were hitting flat spots, against Leeds, home and away,
Yeah.
actually.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think it is a mentality issue, which they're going to have to get out of, because they can't afford to hit that flat spot at Anfield, that is for sure.
Let's talk about Arsenal against Sunderland. That kicks off this weekend. It's a winnable game on paper, especially given that Sunderland seem to be a better team at home. Arsenal now find themselves with 3 strikers, Dino. As the expert in the field, who are you picking as your first choice striker? Jesus, Gyökeres, or Kai Havertz?
I mean, look, it's difficult because Gyökeres is getting so much stick in terms of Gyökeres is probably the less likely to score, but I still think he's more important about how he, the runs he makes, the way he occupies centre backs. I still think that is very, very important, and it is easy at times to watch a substitute striker come on to the pitch and look like they've been so much better than you have, and you've played 75 minutes. So you've run around, maybe not got the service, tired the defender as out, the game's stretched, they come on, and you think, well, then Havertz should start. I do think that confidence-wise, Gyökeres is still struggling. He doesn't, even though he scored quite a few goals in the last 6 or 7 games, for him anyway, there's something missing just in terms of his confidence. I think Šeško was the same. I know the chance he missed, Šeško, where he heads it against the post the other day. Luckily, he gets a second chance and scores. And Gyökeres feels the same. He hasn't yet looked like he feels the part. He feels like the man. And that's still a little bit of a worry.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Gyökeres, but I look at Benjamin Šeško, and he's obviously a lot younger. He's a lot leaner. He's taller. He might not be taller, but he looks a lot taller because he is a lot more slight in his build. Gyökeres doesn't look to me to be as athletic as you would expect from a Premier League striker. When he gets into that groove where he's going one-on-one with a defender, or he's chasing into a channel with a defender alongside him, he doesn't look to me, Dean, and maybe I've got this wrong, that he doesn't have the acceleration to get past a Premier League defender. Now, it may well be that in Portugal, in the Championship, where there's just a little bit of a lack of pace, maybe, I don't know, or physicality in those leagues, you can be a success and you can look a cut above. But actually, up against Premier League defences, he looks like he can't get away.
Yeah, because he can't. That's why I would say that the biggest thing I would always say to people that ask me is, when I moved from the Championship to the Premier League, what was the difference? It wasn't just the quality. There's quality players, quality technicians in the Championship, but when you move to the Premier League, every single player is one of the best athletes. They're the quickest, they're the strongest athletes you come up against. That was the biggest thing I noticed straight away. And he's finding that he doesn't just run away from people anymore. But at the same time, he's getting bored. I can see he's getting bored of making runs and not getting the service. Doesn't know when to make his move in the penalty area because, Madueke, Martinelli, you don't know when they're going to cross it. It's frustrating for me to watch because I'd be going, well, I don't know when to run because of the way they check back. It is difficult for him. And also, that's why I admire Haaland so much, because he's the most patient striker I've ever seen. And Gyökeres is finding that he's struggling for patience, and he ends up not then making the runs and then looking laboured when the ball eventually comes in towards him.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because a lot of people will sit there and go, well, the cross has come in now and he's not there. Well, he was there a minute ago when Madueke had done 4 different bits of skill over on the corner flag and should have put the ball in, didn't do so. There was an incident actually on Tuesday night where Martinelli's going down the left-hand side. He's got the chance to get across into the box. And instead of putting the ball in early, he passes it down the left-hand side to Nkapie, who passes it back to him again. In which case, Gyökeres, who's already gone in, has to come back out again because otherwise he's in danger of being offside. And then he's got to try and make another movement. So I suppose that recipe still needs a bit of time to sort of ferment so that they end up getting the best result. Granit Xhaka has been denied a return to the Emirates, which is a bit of a shame. He picked up an injury. That would have been a good story. He been one of the players of the season for Sunderland this campaign. And I think it would have been a nice moment for him to go back to the Emirates. And also, if it wasn't a nice moment for him to go back to the Emirates, at least he could have had a row with someone behind the benches, which he has done before, not only at West Ham, but at Arsenal, actually.
Yeah, he's going to be a big loss, isn't he, when you look at their away form, because not only is he Sunderland's player of the season, I think pound for pound, he's probably been the signing of the season. You know, they've got a lot of young players. Their recruitment has been excellent, but he has been absolutely key to it. I think he would have got a brilliant response because, yes, there were times in his Arsenal career, as you've alluded to, when he didn't particularly get on with the fans, but by the end, they welcomed him back with open arms, and he's gone away to Leverkusen. He's been invincible there. He's come back and he's really driven Sunderland to the heights they're hitting. And the fact that we're not talking about the Black Cats as relegation candidates at all, and it was only just the start of February, I think is a massive achievement, and he has been a key figure in that. But without him, I fear for Sunderland. As I say, coupled with that away form, this should be an opportunity for Arsenal to go and stretch that lead at the top of the table.
Okay, that's the best of the action at the top of the table. Let's get stuck into our live commentary this weekend. It's an absolute belter. Saturday lunchtime, 12:30. A repeat of the Europa League final. I promise you it will be better. Manchester United against Spurs. It's Manchester United against Spurs, usually sort of echoes of really good swashbuckling games between the two, but everyone can't get out of their head that horrible Europa League final, especially Crook, who hasn't stopped going on about it for 8 months. He's absolutely furious about it even now. Look at his face. He's still so angry. The Michael Carrick derby, as it may well be billed, 3 wins on the spin for the man himself. That Manchester United fan who hasn't had a haircut for ages might be sort of eyeing up an appointment at the local Tony and Guy. Is it going to happen, Crook? Is he going to get to 5?
Well, he won't get a better opportunity, will he? Because after this game, it's West Ham away. And that'll be 5 in a row. It could be 7 in a row because they've got Palace at home and Everton away. Not that I'm getting ahead of myself, but
just a little bit.
I've still got PTSD about that night that Dean and I had in Bilbao. He will tell you how angry I was that if I wasn't being paid by talkSPORT, I'd have walked out the stadium at half-time. And it's not just hindsight. Ruben Amorim should have gone then for managing to lose to this Tottenham team. You look at Tottenham in the table now. They're rubbish, Spurs, but they beat United 4 times last season. So this is a hoodoo that Michael Carrick is going to have to overcome. And actually, I saw a league table of points on the board at this stage of this season compared to last. Tottenham have got 2 extra, I think, so it tells you that they've not made significant progress. United are 12 points better off than they were at this stage last season, which I think just highlights how bad a job Ruben Amorim was doing and how well Michael Carrick has done his first 3 games in charge.
Yeah, I mean, Ruben Amorim was in charge for most of this season, though. So, I mean, most of those points accumulated belong to him.
Now, points per game, you can't really compare what he did and what Carrick did. So, but listen, I'm a little bit worried because Spurs were terrible in the first half against Manchester City. They were brilliant in the second and probably could have won it. So, who knows what Tottenham team are going to turn up. But what I am confident is Manchester United will be a lot more competitive in this game than they were last season in this fixture.
Dean, Norwich only won 4 games in a row and they lost at the weekend. So why did you get your haircut?
Well, did you not see the ponytail at the back that had been growing for a month?
It was either 4 Norwich wins on the spin or that night in Bilbao with Crook that made you lose your hair. Definitely, that's for sure.
I think Rasmus Højlund's only just getting over the fact that he was the one that took the brunt of Crook's anger at half time in Bilbao. So I'm glad he's all right. I've still got to put up with Crook giving me the same sort of rants about that game. But look, this is a totally different Manchester United. It is incredible. I find it I do actually laugh at how players change so quickly. We are so fickle as players. All of a sudden everything's great. Look at the faces of the Man United players, and there's no sort of there's no sort of bickering, I wouldn't have thought, or players coming off the pitch, with their hands over their mouths, talking about what's happened in the first half. It's just incredible how quickly players can change. They look refreshed, and what they will give, and it's pretty obvious now, it is a proper performance. And I've heard Crookie, you say the sort of Manchester United DNA as such. That is what that's what we're going to get with this game. It's going to be Manchester United having a proper go, and Tottenham's away form is good, and they've improved since Solanke, I think's given them that focal point. I'm not sure on his fitness. I know he came off, but you expect now to see a great game of football. Now Manchester United are playing.
Yeah, I mean, their form isn't good, though, is it? Let's be completely clear. Tottenham Hotspur have won 2 of their last 11 games in all competitions. They've really struggled recently in terms of putting results on the board. I don't think they've won a game. They've won one game at home at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in the Premier League since August, which is absolute lunacy, really, isn't it? You talked about the Manchester United DNA and the character of the players there. As far as I understand it, I know Crook will never now give him, because he's been dismissed, never give him any credit, Ruben Amorim, for anything that he's done. But one thing I think he did sort of help to do is sort of help that dressing room in terms of breaking up the cliques, getting the bad eggs out, if there were any. As far as I know now, there's a very harmonious dressing room and a very good dressing room, and the characters within it are supposed to be the kind that you would want if you were managing a football team. So I think they're very happy about the boys that they've got in that squad now. So it's just about building on that and then trying to see where it can take them. United are currently in 4th, and look, without any cup distractions whatsoever, I suppose the job now is to make sure that they stay there, Crook. And because of the fact that they haven't got the extra games, they probably should.
Yeah, I think they have to. When you look at the fixtures that they've already navigated, they've been to Anfield, they've played Arsenal twice, they've played Manchester City twice, they've been to Villa Park, they've only got one game left against Chelsea. So it's a pretty favourable set of fixtures that Michael Carrick has now got to navigate. And you're right, with a whole week to prepare, with no distractions in terms of cup competitions, which is pretty damning actually on Ruben Amorim, that we got to the 5th of February and they're out of every other competition. I would go as far as to say it will be a failure now if they don't finish in a Champions League place.
2 weeks ago, it was an absolute disaster, this place. Now it's a failure if they don't finish in the top 4. It's amazing how things change so quickly, isn't it? I do think that if they do get into the Champions League, 4th or 5th, may well end up getting you that honour, then I think Michael Carrick gets the job, Dean Ashton.
I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. I just think with who might be available after the World Cup, is that ownership genuinely going to turn down the possibility of a Tuchel, the possibility of an Ancelotti, Pochettino? Are they going to turn that option down in favour of Michael Carrick, who would come from Middlesbrough, even though he's lit up the place? And as Crook said, because they're out of every competition, he's now treating it as if it's a failure to not qualify for the Champions League. So therefore, it's not a great achievement, really, is how I would take from what Crook's just said. So therefore, what is he going to do to mean he has to get the job? That's. I just think it's going to be
finished second.
It's going to be well, maybe, but even that, I don't think it's going to be enough, is it? I don't think with the people that could be available, that ownership is going to then go, no, we're going to stick with Michael Carrick.
Why would you go back down the road of employing a superstar manager when that has failed you before? When you've got someone who's got a connection to the club, you've got a geezer sitting here on this podcast who can't stop banging on about the old days and the Manchester United DNA. You've got the connection to that. He's brought the feel-good factor back. They're playing better football. They look much more structured. You can see that there's been work done behind the scenes to develop a squad and a team ethic before that. Okay, it's not perfect behind the scenes. I can tell you that for a fact, but it's getting there. And with him at the front of it, why would that not be the answer? That would sort of appeal to so many different facets. Plus, and I hate to point it out in these terms, but Thomas Tuchel is going to be bloody expensive in comparison to Michael Carrick. And Manchester United a year ago were telling us that they were going to run out of money by the time they got to Christmas.
And he's going to be a lot harder to manage if you're Jason Wilcox and Omar Barada. Now, I'm not saying that Michael Carrick is weak or a pushover by any stretch of the imagination, but Thomas Tuchel has a history of falling out with his paymasters. So I think that will come into play as well. And then there's a time factor, Dean. Listen, I'm refusing to talk about Michael Carrick really being a contender until we get to a couple of games before the end of the season. Let's see what his body of work is like by then. But if you're waiting for Thomas Tuchel, you're waiting until at least the final couple of weeks in July. And I think that's too late. You know, it's a massive summer ahead. You've got a pre-season, maybe even a post-season tour to navigate. They're trying to get a couple of midfielders in. If you're Elliot Anderson and you've got your pick of top clubs in the Premier League, what's the first question you're going to ask Manchester United? Well, who's your manager next season? And if those conversations happen in May and June, they say, well, actually, we don't know. That might be a barrier in the transfer market to what they want to do.
Well, maybe they already do know, or maybe they will already know by that point. Maybe there has been an indication given, and yet it hasn't been sorted. I mean, there might have been a discussion about, what happens at the end of the season, and that they might, not have a manager in place until later in July, possibly. We'll see.
Also, I would just say, as players, how often have we seen this when a manager takes the role till the end of the season? The players know that. It's very different if it's then Michael Carrick is the manager from then on. We've seen players change because of that factor. And also, in the summer, if you are a top player, is it going to affect you when you look at Manchester United and there is Michael Carrick as your manager, or Carlo Ancelotti, or Thomas Tuchel as your manager?
Not that, is it? The
I know, but it does.
That. The trend is down. You look at Bayern Munich.
It is a factor.
Look at even places like previously Barcelona. People that have been promoted through the ranks. Xabi Alonso.
Who can Bayern buy? Bayern don't go and buy the best players. They don't.
Well, they bought Harry Kane.
Yeah, but he was later on in his career, and that's because the no Premier League team took him. That's why.
Yeah, but Musiala is another one that they went and got, and he's a fantastic talent. Leroy Sané was taken out of Manchester City
on the decline, and also Musiala was a young player that came to. They haven't gone out and bought the top players in European football,
but my discussion is that you've got a trend in top level clubs now. Bayern Munich are a top level club. You've seen that in the Champions League. Where you have younger managers that have been involved in coaching setups recently, rather than these big names now. You look at Pochettino, Ancelotti, Guardiola. I think you'll find this in the next couple of months. Mourinho, I think you'll find this after the World Cup as well. They're starting to move into international management. It's easier for them. There's less pressure on them. They don't want to be doing the day-to-day. They cost a hell of a lot of money, these guys, by the way. And actually, it is a young man's game, this coaching lark now. And if you want to be able to move forward, maybe it's not a bad idea to have a younger coach in charge. And you talk about the idea of the players not respecting Michael Carrick as much as maybe they would respect somebody else who has got a better CV. Well, actually, the dressing room that's there right now certainly do. In fact, you look at Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire. Look at Harry Maguire and the performances that he's put in. Why do you think he's put those performances in? Because he knows Michael Carrick. He's worked with Michael Carrick. He's close to Michael Carrick, and he's determined to put his body on the line for that football club that actually, let's be honest, he's been putting his body on the line for that football club for many, many years and has been underappreciated. And I do think that actually sometimes you can try a little bit too hard to change something because it looks better to the outside world, when actually the solution might be under your nose.
Yeah, and also I don't think we should keep saying, well, they've made this mistake with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They can't make this mistake again. I think that's unfair on Carrick because I think his CV is far better than the one that Ollie had when he got the job.
Well, we shall see. We're all of different opinions, which is quite good. Crook is keeping his powder dry. I mean, I wonder why he might be doing that. I think it might be because he's flip-flopped before. Dean's thinking we should get a superstar manager into Manchester United. I think if it goes well, they've got to stick with him. What about Tottenham Hotspur, talking of sticking with managers? I mean, a lot of people saying because they didn't spend anything in the January transfer window, they did get Gallagher in, but they sold Brendan Johnson. They brought in a young left-back as well. That's sort of showing a lack of faith in Thomas Frank. Do you subscribe to that, Dean?
No, I think the ownership would be looking at the treatment room and going, well, what happens when all of these players come back? What are we going to do? What are we going to do then? Our squad is going to be so swollen that there's going to be players sat there on good money that maybe we've brought in a panic, and then it feels like a waste. So I think that's probably what they've looked at. Ultimately, they need the players back fit, don't they? They need their best players back fit. They're missing huge creativity still in the treatment room. And look, I don't think the performances have been good enough, but I think you give in those players that are injured, I think it does have a different look to it.
They were abject in the first 45 in the game that we were at on Sunday, Crook, against Manchester City. They rallied in the second. Was that because they were rejigged, reorganised, inspired by the manager's halftime team talk, or because they took off Christian Romero, had a bust up in the dressing room, and it's easier to play when you're 2-0 down?
Well, I'm not buying into the fact he was ill. I do strongly suspect there were words exchanged in that dressing room at half time, and maybe that's why Thomas Frank made the change. Maybe he was planning it anyway, because you picked out the moment when Erling Haaland got in behind Romero because he let the ball bounce and probably should have scored, put it onto the roof of the net. So he wasn't having a great game, Romero. Maybe that was because he was ill, but certainly they look better with the back four than the back three. And Tottenham fans are loving the fact he's come out on social media and called out the ownership. And I can understand if Bruno Fernandes did that, maybe I'd be saying good on him. The Glazers have had this coming for years, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help Thomas Frank, especially when you get players like Conor Gallagher, who's only been there 5 minutes, liking that social media post because it suggests the manager is not in control of that dressing room. And I think that is a big part of their issue. They've got players with huge egos who think they should be playing for top clubs around Europe, conveniently forgetting the fact they finished 17th in the Premier League last year. They've won 2 out of their last 15 in the Premier League. So I think Romero is a shocking choice of captain. I don't think he's a brilliant defender. If you go back to the reverse fixture, Stuart Pearce, in your commentary, was very damning of Romero at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in this game. And, it's not a surprise that he's over-emotional because he makes rash decisions on the pitch. That's why he gets so many bookings and red cards. And I think he's made rash decisions off it. And this is twice now that he's called out the board on social media. He should be stripped of the captaincy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't agree with you on Romero. I kind of think that he is. I think most of the stuff that you say is true about him being rash, making rash decisions, especially on the pitch and off the pitch. I don't think that he is the best defender in the world. I don't. I think he is another one who takes too many gambles and he makes mistakes, and sometimes he makes misjudgments which cost his team dear because he's being too rash. He's trying too hard to influence proceedings at the top end of the pitch. But on this occasion, this one occasion, I'm actually thinking that, do you know what? He's had enough, Dean. He's had enough. He's had enough of the fact that the board consistently fudged their recruitment and that it's the players and the manager that constantly get the stick. That place is really hard to go and play your football in right now because the level of apathy, disinterest, frustration from the crowd is totally understandable because of the performances over the last 2 years in that ground, right? I can understand why the Tottenham fans are upset. But he's like, well, I can't keep getting a stick for this. We've been asked to play in a certain way. We've got loads of injuries as a result, possibly, of doing that. We haven't got the reinforcements. The quality of the players that you're bringing in are nowhere near what is required if you really want us to have a go for sporting success, which is with the briefing that we were getting when it came to Tottenham when Daniel Levy was removed from his position. And he's gone, do you know what? I'm fighting back here. We're not just taking this. The guns need to be turned on someone else. We said on this podcast literally a month ago, we are going to spend a lot more time looking into the role of sporting directors and asking them what they are doing. And Romero's just shining the spotlight on them.
Yes, but it's not as if that hasn't been the style of recruitment that they've had since he's become a Tottenham player. That is part of the recruitment. It's more younger talent that can be developed and sold on, rather than your ready-made, here we go, we're going to spend loads of money on your wages to get the players that are ready right now. They just haven't done that. So that's not new, but I do think there's a hint of that. I think there's a hint of, I think he thinks he's better than Tottenham for a start, and that's probably been alluded to him by his agent, who's spoken to big clubs around Europe, but I think would take Romero, because I do think there's a very, very good defender there that just needs reining in a bit. I think if you reined him in on the pitch, I'm talking about, there's a terrific defender there, but he's almost allowed to be this player that, like you said, just goes careering in and runs out of position seemingly without being told, and leaves his centre back
He's
short
27.
behind him. Yeah, but I'm just saying that is his character, and I think the right manager, the right club would probably rein that in enough to see the very best of him. But ultimately, he's frustrated. You can just see he is frustrated with the whole situation at Tottenham. And there's part of me that can understand that. It just shows, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how great your stadium is, whether it's the London Stadium or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is out of this world. If the team on the pitch is terrible to watch and you can't get behind the team, the atmosphere is going to be terrible. We saw it with Bowen going back towards his supporters at times. We've now seen it. Romero's the same. When you get to this stage, it's really difficult, I think, as a manager to pull things around.
I wanted to ask you quickly about Dominic Solanke as well. What did you make of the Scorpion finish?
I loved it. I just don't think we see enough of that kind of improvisation, attempting something that, feels a little bit impossible. I loved it because it was all he could really do, and he meant it. He fully meant it, which is what I loved about it.
Okay, let's look now at the bottom end of the table, and we've got another exclusive commentary for you this weekend. Friday night, under the lights, Leeds against Nottingham Forest. Well, this is a relegation 6-pointer, isn't it, Crook? Two sides neck and neck, same points, same goal difference too. Leeds strong at home, but last time out, truly humbled by Arsenal. But there was a problem. The lights weren't on. Turn the lights on at Ellen Road and everything changes. This should be a cracker.
Yeah, it should. It's a massive game, even at this early stage of the season, particularly with West Ham showing improvement. I know they lost last weekend, but again, it was a pretty good performance against Chelsea. So I kind of feel like both teams need to go for the win, because a point would offer West Ham an opportunity to reel them both in by winning at Burnley, as I think we all expect them to. So yeah, really looking forward to this one. It will be interesting to see how Leeds react, because they've been riding a bit of a crest of a wave since Daniel Farke changed his formation at half-time in that Manchester City game. Now they've taken a battering in front of their own fans. How do they bounce back? What they'll be hoping, those Leeds supporters, is this isn't a start of a downward spiral that sees them get sat right back into trouble again.
I thought they might do a little bit more business in the winter window, Dean. Their only recruit in January was Facundo Buonanotte on loan from Brighton. If you look at Nottingham Forest, obviously they bought 3 new faces in. West Ham been busy too. Could the lack of recruitment come back to haunt Leeds United?
Possibly. I know they were obviously interested in Strand Larsen at one point, who I thought would have been a good fit for Leeds if you look at the profile of a Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It still feels a little light in that centre forward position. They are counting on Calvert-Lewin continuing his great form, which is just tapered off a little bit, and Metcher as a backup. Look, I'm doing the game for talkSPORT. I can't wait, because these are the games now as we turn past Christmas that, when you're down there, feel so big. It's crazy how all of a sudden they feel so much bigger than they would have done even just a month ago, because of the state of the table. And like Crook said, just getting that extra 3 points away from West Ham, this game just feels so important for that, and so I can't wait to see how it kind of pans out. But Leeds, you would expect, it has to be a game for them to really take it to Nottingham Forest.
Are we going to have to re-edit this podcast, Crook, do you think? Because Dean Ashton's just told everybody where he's going to be on Friday night, and bearing in mind he's in witness protection, that's probably breaking the rules, isn't it?
You are brutal.
Nottingham Forest bought in Stefan Ortega this window. That's now 14 goalkeeper transfers since their promotion in 22-23. I mean, listen, I'm sure Jeremy, who has put that statistic in our running order, is absolutely right. But if that is true and they've signed 14 goalkeepers in 2.5 years, I think there should be an inquiry.
It's been a problem position, isn't it? And they seem to have solved it with Matt Sells last season.
Well, you were going to solve it if you signed 14, aren't you?
Well, yeah, 14th time lucky. I think Ortega is an interesting one. You know, I think he's a decent keeper, Stefan Ortega. I think there were times actually when he was outperforming Ederson at Manchester City, and he brings that experience to the dressing room. But if you're Matt Sells, you must be thinking, these guys don't fancy me, because they brought in John Victor, put him in the team. He made that horrendous mistake, didn't he? Was it at West Ham where he made that huge
Aston Villa?
At Aston Villa, sorry, and injured himself in the process. But Sells did seem to have lost his first team place up until that point, and you'd imagine that Ortega isn't planning on swapping being third choice at Manchester City for second choice at Forest. So, yeah, interesting to see how long it takes Ortega to get into the team. But 14 goalkeepers is mental.
Yeah, one of them, Carlos Miguel, is now back in Brazil at Palmeiras. Is the biggest man I've ever seen in my entire life. 6'8.5", and he only ever played, I think, one game for Nottingham Forest. That was in the Carabao Cup, in a game that went. Did it go to penalties? I think it went to penalties, and he was so big that when he was standing in the goal ahead of the penalty shootout, he'd put his arms up by his side like that, and his arms were above the crossbar. Honestly, he was the biggest goalkeeper I've ever seen in my life. Funnily enough, Leeds have had a few goalkeeping issues. Carl Darlow.
Did he save any?
Did he save any? I can't remember. It was a long time ago, Dean. It was 18 months ago. I can't remember. The only thing I remember from that game is that Joel Willock scored after 14 seconds. It was like ridiculous. Leeds have goalkeeper issues. They spent 15 million quid on Luca Perry, but he's struggling, and now Darlow is too. I mean, the corner that came in the other day didn't look particularly good, but Arsenal are good at corners. Burnley against West Ham is another big relegation 6-pointer. Huge opportunity for West Ham away at Burnley. Dean, they have to win this game, don't they?
They do. They've got to forget the Chelsea result. Obviously, a great opportunity. I thought Chelsea were outstanding in the second half, just in terms of their intensity. But once again, it exposes that defensive frailty that West Ham have got. Obviously, Disasi's come in, and they're going to hope that he is and he needs to be. Honestly, I know maybe there'll be big question marks over his abilities, his performances at Chelsea. Can he be that player? But he needs to be. If they continue to defend the way they have done, they're still going to struggle massively to get the points needed to get out of trouble. And again, it's the type of game where you have to win it, and if they don't, how will that affect them? But at least the performance levels are almost night and day to what they were.
It's fascinating because someone's going to have a brilliant weekend this weekend, because obviously West Ham, if they were to win and one of the others was to drop points, that will close the gap. That will give them an opportunity. If West Ham were to drop points and one of Leeds and Nottingham Forest is to pick up all three, then they would feel like they're getting closer towards safety. So I do think it's whatever the combination of results ends up being down at the bottom of the table this weekend, it's absolutely huge for someone It's the opportunity you have to grasp now. You've got to make sure you take it. If you're West Ham, you have to win. If you're Burnley, we think they've probably gone anyway, but
Yeah.
They've got to try their hardest to stop West Ham from winning. And if you're Leeds or Nottingham Forest, 3 points on Friday night is absolutely huge for you in the context of the relegation zone. Brighton against Crystal Palace this weekend as well. A quick word on the M23 clash between the two, the grudge match. Palace delighted to see the transfer window close because nobody else can leave until the summer. They do. Well, actually, ended up half of them didn't leave anyway. They were supposed to, but couldn't get away. Now Mateta's going to have surgery on that knee, though, Crook. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that'll be the direction of travel. I'd be surprised if we see him in a Palace shirt again. I think he's burnt bridges with the hierarchy there and certainly with the fans as well. But this is a huge game for Brighton as much as it is for Crystal Palace. I've covered their last 2 games. Stoppage time defeat against Fulham, conceded a stoppage time equaliser against Everton. And if Palace were to win this game, they would leapfrog their arch rivals in the table. And I think Fabian Hurtzler is just starting to get a bit of stick, maybe a little bit unfairly from the Brighton fans, but they need a win big time.
It's been a long time since their last one. I watched them, actually. I watched the game at the weekend, and they played okay. They look like created chances. They just don't score enough goals. That's a massive, massive issue. They've got all the elements of a successful side, but they haven't got an out-and-out goal scorer.
I think they need to put a bit more faith in the Greek boy, Kostoulas. Every time I see him, I think he's got the look of someone with an incredible career ahead of him. But for whatever reason, Fabian Hurtzler doesn't seem to trust him to play too many minutes. It's a baffling one because you're asking an awful lot of Danny Welbeck at the veteran stage of his career to lead the line week in, week out. To replace the goals that Mateta hasn't been scoring, Jurgen Strand Larsen is debut waiting to happen. £43 million with an extra £5 million if he wins the Ballon d'Or, the Champions League, and the Puskás Award. So what do we think is going to happen with him, Dean? How do you rate him as a striker?
I think nowadays you have to do very little to become a 40-odd million pound player. Is probably
How much
my
would you
thoughts
have
on
been worth, Dean? How much would you have been worth? 200 million?
No.
300?
No. If you can't run past the defender, you can't be more than 110 million. So I would say just over 100. I would have been.
Were you the Victor Gyökeres of your day? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes, but better. I think it could be a great fit, though. Actually, it could be a real refreshing start for him. And if Mateta does get that knee surgery, he'll play every game. Strand Larsen, he'll have pace around him at the top end of the pitch. That's one thing Glasner's very, very good at. Is even though they do sit in and defend, when they attack, he allows the forward players to really get up with the centre forward. I think that's why Mateta thrived so much in that side. So I think it actually could really work for him. I think he'll probably have a good second half of the season.
Leeds against Nottingham Forest is 8 o'clock on Friday nights, live on talkSPORT. We follow that up with 12:30 Manchester United against Tottenham. Game Day Live takes you round the grounds with Martin Keown and Scott Minto alongside Adrian from 2:30 on Saturday. And talkSPORT brings Game Day Live on Sunday from the wonderful surrounds of Anfield. Liverpool against Manchester City, Brighton against Crystal Palace, EFL action, Women's Super League action as well. All the goals as they go in with me, the Crookmeister, and Scotty Minto. Looking forward to that. Crookmeister, thank you very much. I'll see you for the big show on Friday. Dino, thank you very much as well. We'll make sure that your identity and location are protected so that you aren't ever discovered, and we'll see you very shortly. This has been Premier League All Access from talkSPORT. We're back on Monday to review all the weekend's action.